Let's talk about dividing by decimals now. We have a problem if we try to divide by a decimal. And the problem is this: we must move the decimal place in both numbers. Now, if we're trying to divide into a decimal, that's okay. The decimal point stays where it is. But dividing by a decimal is where we get into trouble. So remember, you cannot divide by a decimal. That's when you have to move it. Example number 1 is 23.6 divided by 4. We're not dividing by a decimal here. We're saying 23.6 divided by a 4. The number outside the house has to be a whole number. Well, it is. When I have a decimal in my division problem, I always place it in my answer before I divide. Once it's placed, I don't really have to worry about it. I know where it is. It just stays right above where it was under the house. 4 will go into 23 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. And now I'm going to subtract. And I'll have to bring down the next digit, which is 6. 4 will go into 36 9 times. I'll multiply 4 times 9. It's 36. I have no remainder, so I'm finished. My problem, the answer is 5.9. Let's look at number 2. I'm taking a positive divided by a negative. Well, I have an odd number of negatives. Multiplication, division, I know I have a negative answer. So let's see, my problem is going to be 18 divided by 0.06. Well, that's a negative, and I'm going to go ahead and place the negative in my answer so I don't forget. Here's my thing. I cannot divide by a negative. I cannot divide by a decimal. So I'm going to have to move this decimal 2 places to the right. I put this little caret mark to show where my new decimal point is. That means I'll be dividing by the whole number 6. You can just ignore the first decimal that was written. Now, if I move that decimal 2 places, I also have to move the decimal under the house the same number of places. It started right here. It's going to move 2 places here. Let's go ahead and place it in the answer, and then we can just ignore all the decimal points from here on. We have it placed in our answer, just forget about them. Let's say 6 will go into 18 3 times. 3 times 6 is 18. I'm finished, but I do have to fill in zeros until I get to my decimal point. The answer, negative 300. Now for example 3, once again, I'm going to be trying to divide by a decimal, which means I'm going to have to move it. 4.756 divided by 0.82. Since I can't divide by a decimal, I'm going to move that decimal point 2 places. I'll also move the one under the house 2 places, and I'll place my decimal in my answer. Now let's do the division. 8 will go into 47 5 times. That's a good place for me to start. I have to sort of estimate when I'm doing this kind of division. So I say 5 times 2 is 10. Carry the 1. 5 times 8 is 40 plus 1. There's a 41. And I have to line everything up carefully and subtract. 5 minus 0 is 5. 7 minus 1 is 6. I had a good guess there because 82 cannot go into 65. So let me bring down the next digit, which is a 6. And I would kind of estimate again. I'll say 8 won't go into 6, but 8 will go into 65. 8 times. Let's try that number and see what happens. 8 times 2, 16. Carry my 1. 8 times 8, 64 plus 1 is 65. And that's exactly the number I needed. My answer, the decimal was already placed, is 5.8. Example 4, 5, and 6. Example 4 you should try on your own and then turn the tape back on and check it when you're finished. Okay, we notice, first of all, that we have a negative divided by a positive. That means we're going to have a negative answer. Go ahead and write it down so you don't forget. And let's start with negative 3.312 divided by 0.92. Well, once again, we can't divide by decimals. We have to move the decimal place. Same number of places in both numbers and place the decimal in our answer. Now, I'm going to go ahead and place my negative in my answer too so I don't forget that it's going to be a negative answer. And I'm going to say 9 will go into 32. How many times? Well, it won't go 4. It's only going to go 3. So let's try the number 3. 3 times 2 will give me a 6. 3 times 9 will give me 27. It's really important to line these places up so you don't get lost. I'm going to subtract. I have to borrow. 11 minus 6 is 5. I had to borrow from this 3, so it's really 2. I'm going to borrow again. So I'm going to say this is 12 minus 7, which is 5. And I have to remember that I borrowed from that 3, so it's really a 2. I'm finished. I did good guessing with my 3 because 92 will not go into 55. Let's bring down the next digit, which is a 2. How many times would 9 go into 55? Well, 6 is a good guess. And let's multiply. 6 times 2 would give me 12. Carry a 1. 6 times 9 is 54 plus 1, which is 55. And I'm finished with my problem because I have nothing left over. The answer is negative 3.6. Since I wrote the negative down ahead of time, I didn't forget about it. Now let's look at example number 5. What we're doing here is we're saying we're dividing by 100. Now when we divide by a multiple of 10, we really can move the decimal place the same number of zeros that we have. A 1 and 2 zeros, 100 would move it 2 places to the left. The numbers get smaller when we divide, so it's going to move 2 places to the left. If you want to check that out, go ahead. 83.397 divided by 100. Place my decimal point. Where's my first digit going to go? Well, right here, because 8 times 100 would give me 800. I would subtract, bring down the next digit. 100 goes into 300 3 times. I have to multiply, subtract, bring down the next digit, and then 100 is going to go into that 3 times. I'm going to have to multiply, subtract, bring down another 0, and I'm going to say 100 into 979 times. I'm going to subtract, bring down another 0, and I'll say 100 into 700 7 times. Now notice, I've got the same digits that I had in my numerator up here of my division problem. All that happened is I moved my decimal point from between the 2 3s 2 places to the left. 2 places, 2 zeros. Anytime you're dividing by 10, 100, 1,000, 1 million, a 1 with zeros, you move the decimal point, you count the zeros. That's how many decimal points you move it, and you move it always to the left. When you're dividing, you move it to the left. So look at example number 6. I don't want to do this division. How many places do I need to move it? Because I am dividing by 10, I just count the zeros. I move it 1 place. I move it 1 place to the left. My answer is 2.687.